for having me on so early. And I love talking about this. I feel like I've come to peace with it because I've walked through what feels like so many chapters of my life, and how fortunately that I've been able to do that, so early on, I feel like. But I guess my story, where it kind of all began, is really getting an understanding of what I was raised in. Not just, right? Not just my parents, you've heard that, and they're lovely. I love my family very much. But our dynamic was very different. We were kind of forced to grow up really quickly when I was 2. I ended up moving in with our my great grandparents. So we lived in a farmhouse. We converted the attic into a 3-bedroom apartment. And my great grandparents were below, and they were having a lot of difficulties with alcohol and with age. And so we began to oversee and help them heal, help them move through the last stages of life. And in doing that, I witnessed a lot of things and heard a lot of things that I maybe shouldn't have at a young age. And understandably so, that tends to happen, whether we try and control it or not. As we know, as moms, our kids hear things, and it happens, and we just try and make the best of it. So for me, growing up in that environment, great grandparents underneath, in the same house, essentially, I began to grow up really fast. I was raised not only with my great grandparents, but in a very energetic household. So what that also means is I was very aware of spirit, of um, other people's emotions and feelings. So I was that child that just knew things, and it would drive the adults batty.
Yeah, they
Because
did. Yeah, I bet.
they could not keep a secret from me. If they said everything was fine and I sensed things were not fine, I called them out on it. I had no shame in saying, "You're lying to me, and I know it." That little 4-year-old hands up, that's not the truth. You're
Oh,
lying.
forced to
And
be reckoned with already at a
oh,
very young age.
and boy, has it come right around with my daughter, who does the same thing now. So I'm
Sweet
like, oh my
Delilah.
God. Oh,
Sweet
she's a
Delilah.
sweetheart. But she is so in her
Spunky.
own element. She's so spunky, and she tells you what's on her mind, and she advocates for herself. And I'm so proud of her. But yet I'm like, oh, that's what they had to deal with. So
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
but it was, I almost feel her, and I want to cuddle her, because I'm like, oh, this world is going to beat you up.
Mm.
Because she too can feel and sense emotions and energies and see spirit and hears and all those things that I too went through as a young adult and child. And, growing up, feeling and sensing and having these abilities to sense energy and channel it began to drive my parents nuts too, because they didn't know what was happening. I would just blow up the microwave. Every time I used that darn 80s microwave, the power would go out to it. I'd blow it out. My dad would be like, again. And it got to the point where the energy in our house, our hydro bill went from normal, and then it escalated up into the thousands of dollars for our energy bill. And there was no rhyme or reason, nothing changed. It was just the energetics of the house. And they didn't know that at the time, but my dad had a pretty good inkling as to what was maybe going on, because he too can sense. And he brought in a mentor, my first mentor, Lloyd Graham, who he met, and I kid you not, at a sales barn, because he was moving the energetics in the sales barn. So the cattle would walk through the chute because they were freaking out. And he just took his dowsing rods, moved the energy, and the cattle just started walking through. My dad's like, I'm sold. This man needs to come to my house and deal with my daughter, because I don't know what's going on, but it looks and senses the same. It feels the same. Whatever just happened in that pen feels the same as my house. And so Lloyd came to the house, and I remember, as though it was yesterday, I remember him looking at me, and he has these piercing, almost white blue eyes. And he just looked at me, and he's a big man. He's like 200 pounds, like 6'3" maybe. And I'm this little, probably seven at the time, 7, 8-year-old girl. And I looked up to him and he's like, hmm, hmm, hold on. And he hands me these dowsing rods and they just go whoop, whoop. And he's like, did you see that? And then, because dowsing rods, if you know dowsing rods, they just kind of sit on your fingers and then
Mhm.
they move with the energy. And then he put water. He's like, he would put the water in different places. He would put it in front of me and have me begin to find the water. And it was just like effortless for me. He's like, okay. And then he began to ground me and he showed me how to ground myself, how to pull my energy in, and began to explain to me as a 7-year-old girl, as though I was an adult, which I really am so grateful that he spoke to me as an adult. Not that I had something wrong, but he's like, oh, you have a gift. And this is what we do to pull our energy in so we don't keep crashing the microwave and make daddy upset. We need to pull our energy in. And he showed me how to use dowsing rods, but he didn't at any time make me feel like I was crazy or that
Mm.
I was weird. He very much let me know that this is a normal thing. And my parents understood that it was a normal thing too. They were scared out of their minds a bit because I don't think it was to the extent they thought it was. They knew something was up. They knew that I kept crashing microwaves and I was seeing ghosts, spirit, and having messages. And they'd find me occasionally in really weird spots in the house talking to spirit in the middle of the night, and it would freak them out. But um, it wasn't until later in my life where my mom especially became worried. Um, Not worried per se, but she got scared because I was stepping into myself as the empath, as the energy worker that I was. And, we can go back into wounding a little bit later, but there's reasons for that. And as an adult now, I understand why that bit of distance needed to happen so that I can step into myself. But going
Mm.
on with the story, so that's kind of my childhood and what I kind of grew up with. I was seeing, I was feeling, I was very overwhelmed at sometimes with all the energy around me. So imagine now going into high school. I could tell when people were lying to me. I could tell when my friends were betraying me. I could tell when something was wrong. And that drives people away when you know instinctively that that's not the truth. And then on top of that, you have this pressure of doing things to please others because you can sense, you can feel their emotions. So you know when you're pleasing them, you know when you're displeasing them. So when you bring your parents into that, for me, when I brought my parents into that, when I was choosing courses for university, college, I kind of disowned part of myself because as a little girl, I was told that I was going to be a nurse. And then my mom, too, she's like, I think you should go into nursing. And I really wanted to go into psychology, but I knew that it meant a lot for me to follow in her footsteps.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
eventually I went into nursing. And there was a lot going on in my life besides that. That was just one factor of what was going on. It was a big part of disowning myself was taking a career path that was out of alignment with me. But on top of that, I also had a whole other world happening. I was in a very bad accident in the 10th grade, and I had to relearn how to read. I had to relearn how to articulate, self regulate. I had a severe concussion, which still I have blocks in my memory that are no longer with me. I don't remember a lot of things. My personality completely flipped. And all the spiritual things that were happening, all the spirits, the energy, it became so much that I had to completely shut it down.
Whoa.
So I had to shut down that inner being, that spirit and soul part of myself that was so much who I am in order to survive. And that's something I feel like a lot of us do. We disown parts of ourselves in order to survive. We put on a different face in order to survive. We wear one face to work, one face in front of our kids, one face in front of our spouse, our family. And a lot of it's survival, but sometimes it's not survival. It's people pleasing, it's shooting ourselves. And it can really lead you down the wrong road. And for me, I didn't really know what was going on at the time. I just knew that by feeling everything that was going on, it was really leading me down this very dark road. So something had to give. And for me, it was that. And I began shutting that intuition down, really doubting myself purposely, not listening to my instincts so that I could just be normal. I can just go through life with my blinders on, doing what was expected of me and just going for it. But by doing that, my body had a totally different plan. So the more I disowned these parts of myself, the more my body became inflamed. Now looking back as a nurse and as a yoga instructor and an energy facilitator and alchemist, I look at those early stages and I look at other people who are experiencing this inflammation and they don't understand what's going on. The one question I want people to ask themselves when they are having these unknown symptoms is, am I in alignment with myself? What truly makes me happy, right? It's
my whole body is in shivers right now. Like you just landed on that big truth.
Yeah.
It's that disowning and like placing ourselves aside for something or someone else that is not in alignment and truth with our essence.
Exactly. Well, and Paula, that's where I bring in like what I call shoulding ourselves, or as we've discussed prior, is like shitting ourselves. Pardon my language.
Amen.
But that is like the definition of it. We should ourselves. It's disowning ourselves and it's doing things, participating in things that are out of alignment with who we truly are, out of guilt or obligation, pressure, like societal or conditioned ways in which we're taught from young adults, a child, an adult in school, in our environments. And when we disown ourselves, when we make decisions for ourselves based on the shoulding definition of disowning ourselves, we're just inflaming our body. Our body 100% keeps score. And so every time that we disown parts of ourselves, it's like a tick's added. It's like a little sin, or what's the word?
It is a sin.
A cinder, a sin, or like it's like part of the fire. It's just
my gosh.
building.
And you nailed on something there. The word sin popped out.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
It did. Because growing up Catholic, I mean, Catholicism was our life.
Yep.
Like it was my safe haven and not my safe haven. Right.
Yes.
And where I began to separate from my essence. Ooh. The shoulds for me was there. Yeah. That, you are a sin if you do this. And it's like, yeah, but it feels so aligned with everything that I am. Like, what, why is this a sin? And it's a sin is when we are not in alignment with our truest self.
Exactly.
That's a sin.
Right? The same as shouldn't. Like it's the same. It's the same.
Yeah.
And what you just brought back to the forefront of my mind, that if you don't mind if I share,
please. Yeah.
I had a similar experience. Roman Catholic is our background, and we were going to church, and my best friend from church, my Sunday school best bud, her mom. So we went Roman Catholic, but we kind of church hopped because my dad wasn't Roman Catholic.
That wasn't sinful at all.
Right? But it was my mom's way of I was baptized Catholic, Roman Catholic, but it was my mom's way of, in the relationship, a compromise. Okay. We're going
to make it work. She made
it work. And I'm very grateful because now I know etiquette, and I was able to see, it was a very beautiful gift because I was able to see different religions and different stories and how they merge, but then how they differentiate. And getting back to the story is, I went to church one day and found out very early in the service that my best friend, whose mom was the minister at the time, was kicked out of the church. She was no longer allowed to be the minister because she came out, her sexual orientation came out, and she left her marriage. And
Ooh.
so this minister that I was up there, I was the pallbearer, like I was up with her. I was so active in this church. I couldn't understand, because for me, what I was led to believe over and over, this is a safe haven. This is a place where we accept all. And then I was being shown, but you don't. So what else do you not? What else do you not accept? Would you not accept me now if I went down the same road as her? And how is that fair? We're supposed to love all. It just kind of spiraled out, and how with like in my education with Roman Catholic, we have to be baptized or else we're not going to heaven. And my argument with that, and which really drove my mom batty, and I still to this day, I'm like, I'm sorry, I still have these concerns. But what about the orphans, is what I would say as a kid. What about the orphans who don't know about this? Are they going to hell because they don't know that they need to be baptized to go to heaven? And not to bring religion in, and I'm sorry if this is offending, but
Oh
this is
no.
just my story, and this is such a big
I
thing,
gotta interject
a
here.
layer.
I
Yeah.
gotta interject because I can't believe
Mhm.
this story is coming out. Sort of setting up the scene, this young priest began to speak about how we're not worthy. We need to pray a lot to um, even be considered to be worthy in the eyes of God. Begins to say that Danny's father, so the grandfather to my children, may not enter into heaven because he may not be worthy of it, and we may not
Mhm.
be praying enough for his soul to be rid of all his sins. Something inside of me just went off. And as the sermon and the lectures went on, it was more, we are unworthy. We are unworthy. And this message was really loud. Um, and I just felt Elliot's energy, my oldest, sort of like sink in to the pew, like, I'm unworthy, I'm unworthy. And I'm like, hells no. I looked at
Mhm.
him and I said, never let anybody tell you that you're unworthy. He goes, thanks,
Mhm.
mom. And he just hugged me. I said, doesn't matter if it's a priest, a cop,
No,
a doctor, no
no,
authority, not even me is
no,
allowed to tell you that. It
no.
was like this teachable moment. But here's
Mhm.
the thing that you should not do that I did, but maybe everybody should do. Um, when it came down to the, as William calls it, the cracker, he wanted the chip. The
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, I want a
The bread
chip.
of
I said,
Christ.
it's not a chip.
Yeah.
Communion.
Trust
It's
me,
like,
you'll be very let down if you go up there thinking it's a Ruffles plain potato chip.
I know. And I'm like, okay, yep, I don't know, this fire inside of me lit up, Sarah. I got up from my pew and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go up there.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
felt it was like all of my ancestors coming behind me. Okay, sister, we're with you. And he said,
bread of
the
Christ.
body of Christ,
Body
right?
of Christ, yeah.
And then I went, no, thank you. He goes, what?
Mm.
And I said, no, thank you. See, you see me as unworthy. I am not unworthy. No one in this church is unworthy. We're all worthy. I am not taking the host from you.
Oh,
Thank you. God bless. And I just,
good for
and as
you.
I'm walking away, I went, my heart started thumping. And I said, what did I just do? What did I just do? And I'm like, this whole family just saw this. What was I just doing? And I did it for my kids.
Yeah.
I sat down on the pew. Elliot and William hugged me and they were like, oh, mom, you're badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
And that was a huge lesson. Yeah, it might have been embarrassing. It might have been like incorrect, probably not the best time to do it. I mean, this is my husband's father's soul, but I was speaking for his soul as well.
Mhm.
Elliot and I helped him cross over.
Yeah.
We experienced that. And now this priest was telling them otherwise. No, I was not
Mhm.
denying that experience for them. And I
No.
don't care if anybody thought that that was rude, and it doesn't matter. I needed to do that moment.
Yeah.
So that is my, I don't know. I feel like there's this part of me that really wanted to share this societal conditioning of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. What he
Yeah.
was doing was not appropriate. And
No.
it is not for us to sit there and just take it
Yeah.
just because he's been ordained.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? We have to stay within our body. We have to listen to what is right for us, what is right for our soul, and know that no one, regardless, like you said, doesn't matter where you are, who you are, no one is allowed to talk to you, or really it's up to us whether we decide that we agree with them telling us we are not worthy, or whether we agree with them that they are worthy. But we have to know and recognize our own self in order to differentiate between which message we want to see. We have to stay true to ourselves. And I feel like by shoulding ourselves and getting into that pattern of shoulding ourselves, it's so easy just to continue to do that and sit there and take it. If you were out of alignment, or if you had been making those decisions that were not in alignment with yourselves and were riding the should train, so to speak,
Oh, the
do you
should
think,
train.
right? Do you think you would have been in that place of power to stand up for you and your son and your father-in-law who had passed? I don't feel like
Yeah.
that would have happened. I feel like you would have been in that should space where I shouldn't do this right now because I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to embarrass someone, or it's not the best time. You would have sat in those excuses, or not excuses, but your reality of should.
And
And
the
I know
conditioning, right?
the
The
conditioning,
conditioning.
huge,
And my
huge.
mind, if I let my mind override the all the reasoning why to override this, it really felt like this energy was pushing me to do
Yeah,
this.
you were fully
Do this
supported.
now. Do this now. And
Yeah.
my life has been living in truth. And when I stepped out of that truth, when I began to condition myself to everybody else's um, pleasing,
Yes.
and I just saw everybody really happy around me
Hmm.
because I was in pleasing mode. Oh, yes, I'll do this for you. And then, oh, she's so nice. She's so kind. When I began to wake up and be in healing mode, that separation needed to happen, as you
Hmm.
mentioned. The
Yeah.
separation needed to happen in order to see who I really am apart from the entanglement of energy around me.
Hmm.
Um, and to get back to that truth, like acting from the truth, taking
Hmm.
action from that inner truth, no matter what the consequences are. That
Yeah.
is real living.
That's real living. That is living your truth. And that's freaking scary. But you can do it, and you will be supported. Maybe not by the people in the room, but by yourself, your spirit, your soul, your guides, your angels. And those who truly love you and care about you will stand beside you. And I think that's part of the fear and why we so much get into this realm of shoulding ourselves, is because we're scared that we're not supported. Will these people support me if I am authentic to me? If I stop pleasing them, if I set a boundary, because that's what my truth is, it's what I need to be doing for me right now. And I found for myself, I went through college, and as I'm going and continuing to take these courses, my body began to shut down. And I began to get very ill. I ended up in and out of hospitals in a merge. My nursing teachers or instructors, they're like, "You are really sick. Are you sure you should be doing this right now?" And there was no explanation as to what was going on with my body. I would fall asleep. I'd get out of the shower and I'd fall asleep in the chair wrapped in a towel because I was so exhausted from just taking that shower. I couldn't wash my hair because it was so exhausting. To pick up a pen to write notes in school, I couldn't even lift the pen. I got to the point where I was actually done college. I pushed through, tests are being done, and like every test imaginable. And it got to the point where I was off work. I had to go off work. I couldn't finish my shifts. I ended up laying on the floor at work because I was in so much pain. I was just like sobbing, laying on my back, crying. So I was in my doctor's office at this pivotal point, and he turned to my mom, and my doctor at the time goes to her and says, "I think she has MS." I didn't have MS, but I was fortunate enough to have that as a catalyst to take me into a different realm of healing. And from there, I went to my physiotherapist and my chiropractor, who both said, I don't think we can help you any more than what we have. These two individuals, I had been in chiropractic care and physio care since I was in that accident in grade 10. And here we are, I'm in my early 20s. So these guys, they knew me, and they're like, there's something else going on here. I don't know what it is, but I feel like maybe this is the person you should see. And they sent me to a Chinese medicine doctor, Dr. Shu, who's in North York. I credit him with my life because he said words to me that changed my life, changed my outlook on how I see others as well, and how important it is to validate others' realities, even if we don't agree. And he put one acupuncture needle in the back of my head. And at this time, I was on like heavy narcotics. I was on Tylenol 3s. I was on Dilaudid. I was on amitriptyline, nortriptyline, Lyrica, like everything for anything they thought that would take my pain away, and nothing was touching it. But he put one needle in the back of my head, in the back of my neck here, and all my pain went away. Vagus nerve. And he goes to me, "See, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. And if you trust me,
Biggest,
we'll get you better than what you were."
biggest
And
validation. First of all, when
biggest
somebody
validation.
says to you, you are not crazy,
Mm-mm.
your whole
I'm
life
not
changes
crazy.
in that
His
moment.
whole life changed. I trusted him. And what happened through this has been 10 years now that I've known him and been under his care and his family. So it's a group of 3. It's him and his sons. And um, they have taught me so much. They helped me step back into my energetics because his son also has studied shamanism. He could just stand there and sense what I was feeling. And I've never met before him anyone else who could do that. And it just opened my eyes and allowed me to step back into myself very confidently eventually, but just those baby steps. Okay, I began through feeling better, through witnessing someone else live in alignment with themselves. I began to feed off of it's the wrong word, but really just feed off of that energy and begin to understand that it's okay to be in alignment with you, that you're serving you. Because these individuals, they were vibrant with life. They were unapologetically themselves. They weren't shooting anyone. They weren't shooting themselves. They were just being them. And I just wanted to just get to the point one day where I could just break out dancing in Walmart and know like I wouldn't care what anyone else thought because it felt really good to dance to that song. I wanted to just be able to step into what I know to be true and my gifts without really caring about what anyone else thought, but living in alignment with me. And through taking those baby steps, one, you know, being admitting to myself what I'm capable of and realizing that it's okay to sense energy, to be me, to put me first in a healthy way to take care of myself. I then began to slowly disengage with all the shoulds that I was doing. And in my case, that meant stepping away from a relationship, a marriage, for many different reasons. But one of the reasons was it was no longer in alignment with me. I would have been shooting myself had I stayed. And for me, I didn't want my children to believe that's how you treat yourself or that's how a relationship could be, because that's not fair to anyone in the family. I changed my career because it was no longer in alignment. I walked away from a 10-year nursing career because I could not sit one more day in the office and have these individuals write prescriptions to cover up symptoms without getting to the root cause. And
Amen.
I wasn't being heard, and it was to the point where I was still doing my energy work on the side, and that became a threat. I had a couple people who came into the office looking for me, and so they were threatening to report me to the College of Nurses. So for me,
Wow.
that was a no-brainer. I waited. There was a moment where my boss and I parted ways, not in the best way, but we parted ways. I would not, I stayed in alignment to myself, and that was a threat. And so we parted ways. And I tell you, Paula, I left, I think very last week of March that year. August, I was doing my business full time, and not to get into the financials, but I had more success in that 1 month of working for myself than I had in 2 months of working as a nurse. And so that for me was just the signs. I'm like, oh, I can do this. I was able to just put one little step in front of the other, really listen to my body, and using my body as a pendulum is something I love to do. Sitting here,
Mm.
grounding my feet and just
Mhm.
closing my eyes, asking myself, is this in alignment with me? And for me, when I'm in alignment, I lean forward, I lean into whatever's in front of me, the decision, the opportunity, whatever that is. And when it's a no, I lean back. And it's almost as if when you said with
Yeah.
Elliot, he went into himself, and that's not what I want to do. I want to live vibrantly. I want to live open. And with making these steps, with releasing my job, with releasing the should of the relationship, with releasing um, relationships with friends who weren't really my friends, with
Mm.
shifting, releasing foods that weren't serving me, stop saying yes to things that I want to say no to, and realizing that no is a complete sentence, and I'm
No
busy.
is a
No is a
complete
complete,
sentence.
right? No is a complete sentence, and I have plans does not need an explanation. Thank you, but I already have plans. Your plans can be sitting your butt on the couch. That's plans. If that plan, those plans that you have for yourself is more serving to you, or is something you would rather be doing. Something you would rather be doing is plans. You don't
Yep.
have to explain that to that person that's asking you to go out to the bar or go move furniture for them or anything that's not serving you, right? Just by saying, thank you, or I'm sorry, I have plans, that can be life changing. And it would be to the point where I would actually write down on a piece of paper what I was going to say. And, because I'd have to call them and say, oh, I'm sorry, or thank you for the opportunity, but I have plans, or thank you. Like I would write a script for myself and follow it word for word so I wouldn't disown myself, because I knew if someone gave me the littlest bit of resistance at the very beginning, I would be like, okay, okay, and I would just kick myself. But it was doing that over and over again to eventually being like, sorry, I have plans, unapologetically, with compassion and love, of course. But it's through that journey that I now am able to live pain free. I haven't been on a
Mhm.
medication for any body pain or undiagnosed pain in, knock on wood, like 6 years. It's, I went from them thinking I had MS to being completely free of any pain. But I tell you, not a day goes by where I feel my body flaring up if I'm getting out of alignment with myself. Because now my body is like, the sirens go off if I make one decision and I'm having pain in my left hip. I'm like, oh, something's going on. I really shouldn't have done that. I've said yes to too many things. I've overbooked myself. And now my body's going to start being like, woo, woo, you need to slow down. And I found as a nurse too, a lot of individuals would come into the clinic with depression, with anxiety. And a lot of these were men in their mid 40s. And they were like, I don't know what's going on. I feel so depressed. I'm anxious. I can't sleep. I feel sick all the time. I know you're not my therapist would be like the main line I got served so many times as a nurse. I know you're not my therapist. To the point where the doctor's like, I like, can you go in? Because they seem to talk to you. And so they would be like, I know you're not my therapist, but, and I would just simply turn to them and be like, that sucks. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Can I
Mm.
ask you a question? And I would say to them, when was the last time you felt joy? And they'd be like, oh God, I don't know. It's like, I have the toys, I have the house, the family, the dog, the great job, but I don't know. And I said, okay, so let's think back to when you were a kid. What brought you joy as a child? Was it rolling down the hill? Was it was it skating? Was it throwing a baseball? Was it biking? Was it just running into the water? Was it laying on the grass looking at the clouds? And they would generally say, yeah, like rollerblading brought me joy. And they would tell me a story. I'm like, well, then I want you to go home and start doing that. And they would eventually, you know, to each their own, they would either allow themselves to step into the joy and step into their authentic self and sensing that joy again and making that their baby step. Then it would be, then I'm going to sneeze. So my train of thought's going, but it's individual and it doesn't have to be overwhelming, because when we shoot ourselves, that's when our body's going to keep score. It's when our body's going to inflame. It's when we're going to have like shutdown. We're going to go into shutdown. We're going to get ourselves into situations which we may regret. And if you're finding yourself in a situation like that, like you and I both know, when we find ourselves in situations like that, we just have to give ourselves compassion, right? We beating ourselves up and being like, oh, I shouldn't have got married, or oh, I shouldn't have done this. We're still shooting ourselves. But now we're adding shame, resentment, like all these other components onto it, which isn't doing any better. So it's just coming back, showing ourselves compassion, showing ourselves love, and tapping into when we are shutting ourselves now. And again, using that human pendulum, listening to what's going on here, and in your abdomen, your chakras, if these are all in alignment. And that's a yes, saying yes so strongly that no one can argue with you because you are so in yourself, in your decision, that you know it to be true. Just aligning with what you know to be true in your heart, in your soul, in your spirit. The mind, the body, the connection to all that is, right? And when we get to do that and live that way, then we get to live our best life, not just for ourselves, but you see it trickling out into your family. Like you said, your kids, when you stood up and stood in your power and stood in a place of alignment rather than should, your kids coddled you. They just loved you so much. They're like, yeah,
Mhm.
my mom's superwoman. Like, she's amazing. I love her. And what a lesson you taught them. We're teaching our kids how to essentially know their worth, right? And it's just comes back to all those things, like our confidence, our worth, our our energy, our health. To me personally, it comes back to living in alignment and living from a place of who we are rather than who we should be. And that doesn't go, like, I'm not saying that if you get a terminal illness, that's because we're coming out of a place of alignment. No, things happen. We can't blame that on ourselves. We can't blame our illness or wishing ill on others and them getting an illness. That's not how it works. So when we can live in a place of who we truly are, not who we should be, that's when we're going to step into our power. And it can be overwhelming if we're finding ourselves in this transition period. But I can speak from being there, having a marriage fall apart, having um, to learn how to live by myself, changing my careers, coming back into my gifts, even though I'm being told I'm crazy and I'm a witch and I'm doing voodoo, like all those things, and just really being attacked for my character, my ethics, my morals, who I am. I can tell you that you can get through it. As you know, we've spoken about this. We can get through anything. But being in alignment with who you are and staying true to you, even though there's going to be bumpy roads, it's going to lead you to it's going to lead you to your Eden. If we're going back on our whole conversation, right? It's living within us. Our own heaven is living within us. And so
Whoa.
it's,
Going back to
yeah,
our Eden.
right. It's going back to our Eden. When we come into that place of alignment, when we're just starting out, it's almost overwhelming. I feel like I know for me, my first aha moment of, oh shit, was sitting in a workshop and I had to circle my morals and ethics. And I read them. And I realized in that moment that I had been making every decision up until that point. From the point where I was somehow a little girl, everything shifted. From that point on, I was making every decision based on what everyone else expected of me, what everyone else thought I should be doing. And I didn't make a
Bingo.
decision for me. And I tell
Bingo.
you, Paula, every moment in my life flashed before my eyes, and I just sat there, and I must have looked like a complete lunatic of some kind, because the instructor actually came over, bent down on the table and looked at me. Are you okay? Are you sure? Do you need me to stop this? Do we need to go for a walk? And I'm like, uh, uh, I'm good. I'm good. And then like, we're going to have a 5-minute break. Because it was just like, I was just like, everything just flat. Like I just had that pivotal moment. And from there, it just, things fell apart. I went into my Jaguar training. So I studied shamanism from a very masculine standpoint, and did my yoga teacher training simultaneously. Talk about like a mind fuck. That was the most intense unlearning I've ever had in my life. Going through trauma, healing, like the
Mind
mother wound.
fuckery.
Oh my God. I don't recommend doing a huge like 9-month shamanic course alongside a 9-month yoga teacher. Oh, I do. It's great, but just be prepared, like fasten your seatbelt. But I cried for 3 months. Every time I walked into that place for 3 months, I sobbed like a baby. To the point that my yoga instructor started walking towards me, and they just looked at me like, ooh, because I gave them do not touch me look. I'm like, don't come near me. And I sobbed. My dear friend Dana just sat beside me, holding space for me as I sobbed and sobbed. She's like, I don't even know what you're crying about anymore, but we're just going to sit here. And she just rubbed my back. She's like, you got this. And we just let all the tears flow, because sometimes you don't understand what the unlearning is, or what the deprogramming is, or we have a certain way we think it's supposed to look like. And sometimes it's just tears, or sometimes it's just sitting by the river, just staring at the water.
Mm.
It's more than just rational thought. It's just, sometimes it's just that unlearning to be in nature can heal. That, I don't know if that even made sense. It made sense in my mind, but as I speak it doesn't really come out as I thought it would. But just sitting with nature, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, can just be enough to continue the unlearning, can begin to heal it. After the tears kind of subside, the rainbow emerges, and things just start to look a lot brighter, and you feel a lot lighter. And it's just those baby steps. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just what's best for me in this moment? What's one thing I can do today that's in alignment with me? And that might just be taking a bath because you're tired. That could be just buying yourself a flower or a plant, because that's what you really, really need right now. And every time you look at that plant, that's a commitment to me. That's something I did for myself. If you've done everything for everyone else, that's something I did for me if I bought that plant. And that's the message in that. So it doesn't have to be, and it can be saying no to a commitment, and spending the day just pampering yourself, because that's what you need, is to refuel. And then when the family comes home, or when you meet up with a friend after that, you're more present for them. You're more able and in a space to hold, and have the capacity to hold space for them if they're grieving or going through something, or just being happy, being in the moment. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Shooting ourselves, yes, it's so easy to do, and I don't think we're ever going to get away from completely not shooting ourselves. I think it's always going to be a factor in our lives one way or another, but I think just being aware of it, and then making that decision, okay, I can should myself here because that needs to happen right now. Because sometimes we do need to do things that are out of alignment. Even though we really want to have a bath, our kid, it really, really needs us right now. It's not just this linear way. It's complicated.
Illness
Mm-hmm.
illness becomes the catalyst to lead you home.
Yes. Yeah, it does. That, because to me, that's the reckoning point. That's the point where you're now ill. You have the choice to stay in that mindset and accept your diagnosis as a sentence. You know what I mean? No, you have this. You can accept that and believe it in every cell and accept it, and not only accept it, but then begin living your life from that standpoint. Or you can take that diagnosis, say, okay, but not attached to it.
I think that you made a really good point here that as we're becoming more educated about trauma, I
Mhm.
think that we can become also attached to trauma as an illness.
Yeah, it can be, our trauma can become us,
Yes.
right? And same with our diagnosis, it can become us.
It can be the
But
lens
as
in which we see everything through, right? Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's, and I'm sure we've all met someone too who they are so, their diagnosis, or they are so much their trauma and so embedded in it, that to begin to release it is actually causing them more trauma. It's causing them more pain. They can't let go because the fear and the pain and agony that goes with releasing that identity is just unfathomable. We want our identity to be our soul, our spirit, our authentic selves. We don't want our identity to be that of I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, I am fibromyalgia. Like, we don't want that. Just as though we wouldn't say someone with who's living with Down syndrome is Down syndrome. Like, you know what I mean? There's different ways to go about it. And I believe the
Yes.
same way. I am not my trauma,
I am
right?
not my
I'm not
trauma.
my trauma. And
Yeah.
then that empowers us to live from our highest self, or the best self we can be in that moment, right? There's a magnet on my fridge that I was given by a dear friend. It's from Kripalu, um, over in Lenox, Massachusetts, from their shop, and it says, shape your life or someone else will. And that we get to choose. We get to choose our life, we get to choose our journey, we get to choose our story. And it's up to us to continue on the path that is being chosen for us, or we can begin to take that baby step off to be in realignment with ourselves.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh, sister speaks for me. Thank
Aho!
you. Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank
love you so
you.
much.
Oh, I love you too.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
this
for,
jam.
you're welcome. Thank you for
Um,
meeting me so early before virtual school.
I feel like my mind is blown. Wow, we went on
Yeah,
some vortex, and I just thank you for that.
yeah. Oh, you're so
Thank you,
welcome.
Sarah. I love you.
Love you too. Thank you, Paula. Mwah.